Jewish objections to Jesus. What kind of God do you have? Some Jewish objections to the messiahship of Jesus, rest on questioning the virgin birth and Jesus' resurrection from the dead. Objections to these two matters are, however, not the real issue in themselves. The real issue is what kind of God one believes in. The question is not, is such a thing as the virgin birth possible, or is such a thing as resurrection from death possible? From the strictly human viewpoint, they are not. The real question is, can God do such things? If he cannot, he is not much of a God, but God is God, and from all that this particular title infers, includes, and indicates, he can do anything he wants to do. The only possible limits to God are the limits he places on himself. If God is all-powerful, things like the virgin birth and the resurrection are easy things for him to accomplish. It is an amazing inconsistency to allow that God has created the heavens and the earth, and then to doubt his ability to bring about a virgin birth. If he can create the wonder and vastness of the universe and all the complexity of the single cell, the virgin birth and the resurrection are very simple matters. For a Jew who believes in God, there is no reason to doubt the miracle of the virgin birth. The real question is, did it happen with the birth of Yeshua? The Old Testament said that it would happen with the Messiah. The New Testament said that it did happen with Yeshua. Jesus did not bring peace. The most common objection one hears to the messiahship of Jesus is this: he could not be the Messiah since he did not bring peace. Well, since he was not accepted, he could not very well bring peace, could he? Furthermore, the purpose of the Messiah's first coming, or as the early rabbis would have it, the purpose of the coming of the first Messiah, the son of Joseph, was not to bring peace, but to suffer and die. Peace would come through the coming of the second Messiah, the son of David, or, as the New Testament would have it, by the second coming of the Messiah. So the messiahship of Jesus must first be judged on whether he did suffer and die for sin, and then on whether those who believed in him received their justification and forgiveness of sins. That he suffered and died for the sins of Israel is the testimony of the eyewitness accounts we have in the New Testament. That Jews have been receiving and experiencing the forgiveness of their sins through faith in the substitutionary death of Jesus has been testified by many. Both Talmudic Judaism and the New Testament agree that there would be one coming of a Messiah to suffer and die, which would precede the coming of a Messiah to bring peace. The point of difference is in the former's claim of two different Messiahs and the latter's claim of one and the same person, Yeshua. So while it is true that Jesus did not bring peace, that was not the purpose of the Messiah's first coming. This is not a valid argument against his messiahship, for Jesus will yet come again and will yet bring peace. Theological objections to Jesus by rabbinical authorities have all repeatedly attacked the same areas so as to become stereotyped. These will usually center on the question of three things. First, the virgin birth. Secondly, the claim of Jesus to be the Son of God. And thirdly, the fact that Jews cannot believe that a man can become God. Objections to the virgin birth have already been dealt with in this study. The kind of God one believes in is still an issue. As to the claim of Yeshua to be the Son of God, one objection reads like this: the New Testament knows Jesus as the Son of God and as Messiah. Judaism, however, does not acknowledge a Son of God who is set apart and elevated above other human beings. The Jewish conviction is that all men are equal before God and no mortal can claim divinity. Here's an example of how the messiahship of Jesus is judged purely on the basis of modern Judaism. Jesus could not be the Messiah, the writer says, since Judaism does not acknowledge a Son of God to begin with. The writer would have been more honest had he said that Judaism, as he knows it, which is only modern Judaism, does not acknowledge a Son of God. In the case of Reform Judaism, there would be no Messiah at all. The writer effectively ignores centuries of Jewish theological treatments that certainly do treat the Messiah as being a Son of God. Had the writer taken the time to look at the early rabbinical interpretations of Psalm 2, they would have shown him not to make such a rash statement. The Old Testament, which is the basis of Judaism, did teach that God would have a son. That son is the Messiah himself. The issue is not whether Judaism acknowledges it or not. The issue is whether the Bible teaches it, and the Old Testament certainly teaches it loud and clear, and of course Jews cannot believe that any man could become God, and that is why Jews cannot accept Yeshua. To begin with, the fact that a man cannot become God is very true, and no man can claim divinity. This is where modern Judaism has misconstrued the teachings of the New Testament. The New Testament never claimed that Yeshua was a man who became God. This is heresy. This goes contrary to Judaism of any form, biblical, rabbinical, or otherwise, and it also goes contrary to the faith in the Messiah. Neither the New Testament nor Yeshua ever taught that there was a man who became God. The New Testament claims the reverse. It was God who became a man in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. If God became a man, this man would certainly be superior to other men. He would now be the God-man. Certainly Judaism does not dare claim that God cannot become a man if he wanted to. The God of biblical Judaism is all-powerful. God can do anything he wants to. If there's anything God cannot do, he is less than God. So the real question is, did God choose to become a man? Not can he. The New Testament claim is that yes, God did become a man. It is amazing how so many rabbinical writings about Jesus refuse to discuss this very point and insist on discussing how could a man become God. Other common objections also miss the real point. One such objection is the fact that Yeshua forgave sins, which is something only God can do. Again, this is true. Only God can forgive sins. But if Yeshua were the God-man, God who became a man, the forgiving of sins would be part of the authority of this God-man. Another objection of this nature centers around the fact that Jesus performed his miracles in his own name. First of all, it might be said that many times Jesus claimed that he was doing his miracles by the power and authority of the Spirit of God. It is true that the prophets did miracles and gave God the credit, but again, the Messiah was not going to be just another man or just another prophet. Rabbinical theories taught that the Messiah, because he had the name of God himself, would be able to do things in his own name. That is why the Messiah kept playing such a prominent role in rabbinical theology. That is why the Jewish people, throughout the centuries before modern liberalism crept into Judaism, continually looked forward to the coming of the Jewish Messiah. The Messiah would have such authority and such power that he would be able to accomplish great things in his own name. Jesus claimed to be that Messiah, and so should, in fact, have been able to do those things in his own name. Jesus did accomplish those things in his own name. By doing so in his own name, he substantiates his messiahship